Should I start over? I'd like to begin today by introducing our panelists. So representing the Red Nation, we have Nicole Martin. Representing Slow Factory, we have Celine Saman. Representing Oahu Water Protectors, we have Gina Hara. And representing Af3irm Hawaii chapter, we have Alexandra Balgos. And finally, I am your moderator. My name is Jennifer Marley. Umbia Gindi, na okawe Jennifer Marley, na vitewa kawan po bohogeo winge ibedi omu. That's my introduction. I am from the Pueblos of San Ildefonso and Zia, and today I am representing the Red Nation and Red Media. So I would like to begin today by letting you know that this is just part one of a series that's being brought to you by the Deep Ecology Project. And so today's panel is an opening introductory panel. Here we have the organizations that are a part of the Deep Ecology Project, which is to bring attention to the Red Hill jet fuel spill on Oahu. This is a Navy, it's the Navy's fault, right? And it is now impacting the water supply in Oahu. So this affects everyone, including those who represent the U.S. military. Of course, we chose today for a very specific reason, right? Today, people are celebrating U.S. independence, but we say no. We need to celebrate anti-imperialism and the ongoing anti-imperialist struggles that we are all fighting in as Indigenous people and as people who care about the earth, as the humble people of the earth. So the next panel is going to take place the first week of August. This one is going to be hosted by Slow Factory, and it's going to focus locally. It's going to focus on issues in Hawaii. It's going to be focused on statehood, critiques of statehood, and of course, the ongoing Navy pollution. Following that, there's going to be another panel hosted by Oahu Water Protectors. And this is going to be later in that month. And this one's going to be branching out, looking at the internationalist perspective and anti-imperialist struggles abroad. So to get started today, I would like to remember the late and great Haunani K. Trask, our beloved sister, mother, auntie, and elder. She said famously, "We are not American. Say it in your heart. Say it when you sleep. We are not American. We will die as Hawaiians." So I'd like to honor her today, and may she be with us. Okay, that being said, I'd like to open it up for the panelists to go ahead and introduce themselves, and then I'll get started with questions. Would you like to go first, Alexandra? And then you can pass it to whoever you'd like.
Sure, thanks, Jen. Hi, everyone. Maya Pagkatanapo, and good afternoon. My name is Alexandra Balgos. I'm one of the current co-coordinators of Af3irm Hawaii. I've been organizing with Af3irm since 2019. I'm a queer working class Filipina settler in the illegally occupied Kingdom of Hawaii on the island of Oahu. It's an honor to be here on this historically terrible day to celebrate our collective efforts to dismantle the systems that seek to marginalize us. So really grateful to be here and have this conversation together. And I'll pass it off to Nicole. Thanks.
Yat Nicole Martin Tachini Nishla Kiasani Bashichi Chija Dashiche Kiasani Dashinale. Good evening, everyone, or hello, everyone, depending on where you are tuning in from. I am located currently here in Cowlit, or on Cowlit's land in Portland, Oregon. And I'm excited to be here with y'all. Yeah, I'm looking forward to this conversation and how what we all can take away from this conversation moving forward to leave the world a better place for our future generations to come. Thank you for having me, and I'll pass to Celine.
Thank you, Nicole and Alexandra and Jen. and Gina. Thank you everyone from the Red Nation, Red Media, Oahu Water Protectors, Af3irm. Nice to meet you all. This is our first time connecting. And thank you to Wahiki Amaili who invited me to join today. My name is Céline Simhan. I am one of the founders of the Slow Factory. I am calling from Lenape, unceded territory of the Lenapehoking. I'm in New York. And I am a Lebanese refugee who came to first Canada, then immigrated to the United States in the mid-80s, but ended up going back and coming back here for many reasons. I am very excited to be here and to support the Deep Ecology Project and to explore the anti-imperialism struggle and resistance locally here in the United States and internationally. And I'll pass it on to Gina.
Hi, my name is Gina Hara. I'm from Halava Valley, which is right next to Red Hill, Kapukaki. I've been only involved since 2014 when we had a spill of 27,000 gallons. And so I've been to almost every meetings for 8 years. And the really big spill again happened last year in 2021 over several incidences. I'm really excited to talk to everybody about the systems that caused this, and so many thousands of people testifying, and how the system continues to be the way it is, and ideas, positive ideas on how to address this systemic problem, because this is a tip of the iceberg. Thank you.
Thank you so much, everybody. Again, it's an honor to be here and an honor to be in conversation with you all. So here's how the panel's going to be. I have 3 questions that I'm going to ask everybody on the panel, and then I have 1 question for each individual panelist. We're hoping to wrap up in about an hour and a half, and if we happen to have any free time at all after, maybe we could take a couple questions from the audience, but I can't guarantee that. So I'd like to start with the first question. And that question is, talk about your organization a little bit and how it views imperialism and how it incorporates anti-imperialist principles and tactics into its organizing. Let's go ahead and start with you, Gina.
So our organization, actually, Oahu Water Protectors, came together before the actual large spill last year, because over, like, say, the last 76 leaks that we've had, people were protesting individually. So we made someone, actually Sierra Club, other people, D-Mill, people, things like this, the Hawaii Peace and Justice, Ka'ohewai, all types of coalitions came together. And it just so happened a month or 2 before the big spill, we were already talking regularly on Zoom. So I don't know, it was like, that's what happened. And regarding anti-imperialism, the way it goes down a lot in Hawaii is we have, for example, bombings of Kaho'olawe, or just, we are at the center of all the military practicings and all of the military chemicals. So we are like really good example of, if we can get out of this, then the world can be saved. So, like, for example, we have the Pohakuloa with depleted uranium being shot on the Big Island as a regular practice. Depleted uranium also entering in Schofield Barracks, which is on this island, Oahu. We have Makua, like a variety of issues. Makua, just people's houses getting taken away for military. I mean, we could go on and on. So that's part of it. But the main problem right now is our aquifer, which is the 20% of our water was damaged by the spill, which we've been fighting the leaking about for so many years, like decades. So behind me is a screen of the oil from the testing wells of when it happened at some of its peak. That's how we're organized. We are an individual coalition of activists that just came together. It's kind of like
I'm sorry, Gina, you cut out just a little bit for that last part. Can you please repeat that?
The last part. So it's basically grassroots coalition of people who are really concerned, not just about this is like a crisis because water is life to, especially in Hawaii, water is like sacred. And for people not to, for the military and just, there's like thousands of people testifying, thousands of people trying to do things, but it took a spill coming into people's houses for the military to pay attention. And even still, they were in denial and had to go to the Pentagon in the end. So at this point, after 8 years of doing this, my suggestion to everybody is you've got to go to the Pentagon. And I just feel like we need to suggest a new way to address this. The way that we were addressing it prior, it just doesn't work. So I hope that people can talk about that today, that this is very passé on how they handle issues. And the fact that they don't bring up of every single toxin that's coming into the islands and on a routine method and killing the population, you know what I mean? So that part is, I don't know, other people can talk how their organization and how it came about, I think now.
Thank you so much, Gina. Let's go ahead and pass it to Celine. Do you need me to repeat the question?
Please, I got
Yes,
lost.
of course. So yeah, just talk a little bit about your organization, how it views imperialism, and how it incorporates anti-imperialist principles into your tactics and organizing.
Thank you so much, Jen. And I just want to give a shout out to Jenny and Tori, our American Sign Language interpreters. I forgot to mention you all in the beginning. Thank you for being here. And thank you to Red Nation and the Red Nation for organizing this. It's really amazing to bring accessibility to all these topics. My organization is the Slow Factory. It started in 2008, the research began, but it launched in 2013. It's a lot based on my lived experience and my lived experience as the praxis to a little bit what is my relationship with colonization, imperialism, war. I'm a first generation war survivor and a second generation war survivor, actually. And you know, a first generation child refugee, and we left the country that I was in. I come from Lebanon because of what was happening. I know I have a lot of peers that are in the audience that are Lebanese or coming from war from the global south, or that are being relocated or forced to be displaced. And so that's a little bit where I come from and why I started to do the type of work that I'm doing in relationship to what's happening in Palestine. It's deeply intertwined with what's happening in Lebanon, what's happening in Syria. And so kind of representing a part of the world that is, I don't know, I'm just going to quote Naomi Klein, where it's considered like a location or geographic location that is for sacrificial land and sacrificial people for the benefit of the extraction of oil. And it's kept in a way under wars, under a lot of political unrest, so that access to oil, access to resources is done in such a way that benefits the global north. So coming from that part of the world, I was socialized to be very political at a very young age. And I kind of brought a perspective, a very important perspective to my work. Then when I fled to Canada, I was in Montreal. I was also educated on what was happening in Canada and how Canada was a colonial project. And from one thing to another, I started designing and creating an agency, an organization that would use design as a medium for social change. That because the thing that we don't see is that oftentimes it's portrayed as, oh, it's political, or it's very complicated, or it's really far away from who we are or how we can change it. But all the things that we are seeing, the injustices, the pollution, are by design. Like, they are designed this way. Design is not just for aesthetics or function of a product. It's a practice that creates pretty much everything that we interact with, including the political systems that we see. And so through my research, I started demonstrating that, tracing data, for example, and designing it in a way that can be understood. So using data visualization to seeing, just tracing very simple things that are used in pretty much all of the objects that surround us. So plastic, paper, fabric, clothing, chocolate, coffee. Like, if you trace everything back to where they're being extracted from, I concluded that, colonialism is not a thing of the past. It's an economic reality. It's not something that is, something that we did once in the very far away past. It's done constantly. And so bringing these topics to the mainstream really allowed to have this access to knowledge that otherwise would be, behind closed doors, or you would have to have a lot of money to be able to do a PhD or a master's to be able to focus on. And I say a lot of money because here in the United States, it's extremely expensive to study or to, go into higher education, and in Lebanon as well. But in other countries, it's not. So I just want to preface that it's because I'm based in the US that I'm saying that. But long story short is, the creation of the Slow Factory is to bring, it's to make accessible information that is needed for our collective liberation, and not just information, here you go read this, also communities and tools and ways that we can imagine and create and design something completely different. So that's a little bit where we're coming from. And I just want to say very quickly a little bit about deep ecology, and to shout out a little of what Gina was talking about. I sent a couple of links in the chat if you want to take a look, and of course follow Oahu Water Protectors. Right now what's happening is that in Red Hill, the US military has put, I don't know, for those of you who don't know, which I'm sure there are, has basically like infiltrated the mountain. And if you look at the image, it looks like a bunch of tampons inside of a big mountain, or really phallic objects. It looks like violation. It really looks like raping the land. Like, it can't look like anything but. And they are filled with fuel. Okay. And since the 40s, these tanks were already pretty cheap and pretty damaged. And from the 70s, again, another alarm was raised that these tanks are not good quality and they are eroding, and they're filled with fuels from the 40s and from the 70s. And now they have been leaking into the aquifer. They're positioned 100 feet from the one and only aquifer in Oahu, and they're poisoning the water. And you're going to ask yourself, why is Slow Factory involved in this? Because whatever, you have enough problems on the mainland or in Lebanon, because water in relationship to military occupation is an international issue. It's the same issue that we are facing in Palestine. It's the same issue we're facing in Lebanon. It's the same issue right now. There are tensions between Hezbollah and the Israeli military because of access to water, access to gas, access to resources. These are international issues. And the way that we mobilize from an international perspective on a global front of progressives is to be able to create these connections and connect the dots between what's going on in Oahu and how it's impacting us internationally. So take a look at the links, and I'll pass it on to Nicole.
Thank you so much, Celine. Would you like me to repeat the question, Cole?
Yes, please.
Okay, so talk about your organization. In this case, feel free to talk about Red Nation as well as Indigenous Women Rising or any other organizations you're affiliated with, and how it views imperialism and incorporates anti-imperialist principles and tactics into its organizing.
Thank you so much. Also too, for recognizing, I feel like a lot of us have, some of us have the ability to organize in multiple spaces. So as Jen mentioned, you know, I am also part of Indigenous Women Rising, and that one's a reproductive health collective, working to make reproductive health, sex education, abortion care, midwifery care accessible for our Indigenous relatives across the so-called United States. And so I joined the Red Nation relatively later, but it was originally founded and started doing their activism and organizing in 2014. And largely to address and bring attention to a lot of the border town violence that happens in our communities, especially against our unsheltered relatives. You know, they tend to be the target and viewed as the most disposable of our relatives in our communities. And so I think when when we think about how are we doing putting how would you say our practice and theory together in action, you know, it looks like a variety of ways. I have so many comrades within the Red Nation who are so skillful and bring a lot of skills and knowledge to the organization, which really kind of guides and leads us to be you know, not only protectors for Mother Earth and all of life's elements, including water, especially, you know, considering that our bodies are made up of water too. We recognize the importance of making sure that our relatives, you know, don't have to be bullied or enforced or further colonized by this government system, because we know that everyone deserves, you know, basic health care, their basic needs met. Like nobody should go hungry, nobody should, you know, be struggling, right? Like to be good relatives, I feel like is a common understanding for my comrades within the Red Nation, but also for like across Indigenous communities. You know, I feel like a lot of the work that we do tells us to, or like also tells us to be led by our core values of being a good relative. And so knowing that some of our community members don't have the capacity to like organize, or they weren't given tools to understand language that's within the movement, you know, regardless, there's a space for everyone. And I feel like the Red Nation as an organization really takes pride in that, takes pride in knowing that, like, you know, we don't always have to be like in our organization, some of us, we don't always have to be like on the microphone or something or doing direct actions. You know, there's other comrades who like will who will be like scouting or on the lookout, you know, like security, right? And or like our relatives who cook for everyone and bring food and, you know, feed the revolution. We have comrades who hold who carry prayer, right? A good majority of us are very understanding that, you know, the power of prayer, it can change a lot of things. And so there's different roles that we have within the Red Nation. And, you know, one thing that's like for sure is like for our communist and anti-imperialist principles, to like what we follow is ending the unequal relations between European and colonized nations, and ending the violent competition between the nations of exploiters and colonizers, and ending, you know, the extraction of the earth for profit. And I feel when it comes to anti-imperialism, indigenous peoples across the world, you know, were heavily and deeply and continue to be impacted by colonization, especially from the United States being one of the big powerhouses, right? And so for our work, you know, it's a constant thing, and within our org we say, like, you know, it's a prayer that we just don't have the like, we just can't put down the prayer whenever we feel like it, whenever things get hard. Like, we have to continue to hold that prayer strong, because that's what's going to help us get through, you know, a lot of these obstacles that we're facing. And as people, it's imperative, you know, because this world, or this earth, you know, it can live without us. It's us as five-fingered beings that need this earth to survive. And we do, whether like we like it or not, we do need one another to also overcome a lot of these things, overcome the oppression that we face and the sickness that it instills in our physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual well-beings. And I think after what we've been seeing with the United States government, the federal government, just blatantly disregarding Indigenous sovereignty, is because they're scared, that, you know, when we come together, rather than being against one another, that we can do so much more. And so now they're scared because they know that we're coming for them. They know that we're coming to make sure that there's equal distribution of wealth, you know, because our health is our wealth. You know, if we don't have our health, that limits us from doing a lot of things that we would love to do, or just enjoying our lives. And so, but not only that, like, I hope too that we recognize that even though we're just five-finger beings, we're not there shouldn't be a hierarchy, is what I'm saying, when it comes to that. And knowing that all other living beings that live in the land, that live in the air, you know, they're very much a part of our ecosystems. And I hope that we start to realize that, and start taking better care of our non-five-fingered relatives too, because we all learn from one another. We all learn how to how to survive, and how to find the joy in little things, right? And so for the Red Nation to see and witness, but also be a part of like a group of comrades who believe in that strongly, and who will do direct action, who, you know, will pool their resources together, like in a moment's notice to make sure that, you know, we're here to resist imperialism in all of the ways that it destroys, you know, the livelihood of things. And so I hope going forward, you know, people will be inspired, or, you know, to follow and trust Indigenous leadership. You know, I feel like Indigenous people all across the world, you know, they know what their communities want, and they want the best for their communities, and they're deserving of it. We're all deserving of it. So yeah, thank you for the question.
Thank you so much, Cole. So finally, Alexandra, talk about your organization. I'm a big fan, by the way, and how it views imperialism and incorporates anti-imperialist principles into your tactics and organizing.
Thanks. First off, I just wanted to say thanks for all the power that has already been like shared by all of my co-panelists. Like, yeah, definitely empire should be afraid of us. Af3irm Hawaii is a local chapter of the flagship Af3irm National, which is an all-volunteer grassroots organization of women nationwide engaged in transnational feminist, anti-imperialist organizing, and dedicated to the fight against oppression in all forms. Af3irm women are committed to militant movement building from the United States and affect change through grassroots organizing, trans-ethnic alliance building, education, advocacy, and direct action. And our name is actually an acronym for Association of Feminists Fighting Fascism, Imperialism, Refeudalization, and Marginalization. So we're transnational women who were created by migration under imperialist globalization, and we're the bearers of a multiplicity of histories, languages, cultures, and worldviews. We understand imperialism as the highest stage of capitalism and the driving force of colonialism. The idea that nations can and should seek to extend their presence, power, and influence in foreign lands as a means of creating a new empire. And just as Celine said earlier, colonialism isn't one point in history, it's an ongoing project that we are feeling the effects of every single day. So Af3irm looks at the oppression of women as the foundation of the creation of private property, and studies how the evolution of women as the first form of private property manifests itself under capitalism, imperialism, refeudalization, fascism, and colonialism, all of the systems that are actively seeking to marginalize us. So we see this as women of color as a global commodity, racialized, gendered, and as cheap labor bought and sold and exported to maximize profits. So to us, being an anti-imperialist organization means that our political sisterhood and solidarity needs to be grounded in material history. So our oppression is material, and so our resistance has to be too. So some of the tenets to our anti-imperialist organizing include commitment to forging deep horizontal alliances between women in and beyond geographical territories, to feminist solidarity across borders that calls attention to the micropolitics of daily life and large processes across the globe that are tied to historical materialism. And then the third is to envision a possibility of activism and struggle outside of academia, because it's us regular working people who are constantly under siege by imperialism and capitalism and all of those systems. So political education through feminist pedagogy should teach active citizenship and struggles for justice. Our major campaign focus areas include like advocating for immigrant women's rights, fighting the trafficking of women and children through our Purple Rose campaign, and against militarism in all of its forms. We've heard a lot about how the military is impacting Oahu's water supply and has had a long, very, very long history of desecrating Hawaiian lands. So Hawaii in particular is a battleground for Indigenous, immigrant, and women's self-determination. We focus on fighting for improvements to women's daily lives on all fronts, including the legislature, the city council, the courtroom, the boardroom, the classroom, and on Aina that is constantly under siege. Sorry. Some wins that we've had recently include creation of the first MMIWG task force in Hawaii, and this year actually was, as of this year, Native Hawaiian women and girls will be included in MMIWG research. We stopped a casino from being built on Native Hawaiian homelands. We paid rent and bills of dozens of sex trade survivors in Hawaii through our emergency relief fund for folks impacted by the sex trade here. We did deep canvassing to educate renters on illegal evictions and housing rights during COVID, and educated thousands on the harms of liberal feminism and the exploitation model. So we work on a lot of different things. Feminism is workers' rights, feminism is land rights, and all of those things. So yeah, that's a little bit of what we're working on and how we incorporate anti-imperialist organizing in our work.
Wow, thank you so much, Alexandra. You're so powerful. And again, I'm just a huge fan of the work Af3rm does. I think it's absolutely crucial. And thank you so much for sharing that with us. That was a really, really amazing breakdown. So how about we go in reverse order this time with the second question? So I'll start again with you, Alexandra, if you don't mind, for question 2. And that is, an integral formation of American imperialism is the U.S. military-industrial complex, right? And it's a wastelanding of Indigenous territories, resources, and people. So how do you see this taking place, where you are and abroad? And what is your organization doing to counter it?
Sure, okay. So Af3rm Hawaii breaks open the conversation about gender and fights for transnational feminist transformation in the following context. So nearly 25% of land on Oahu is exclusively occupied by the US military. Hawaii plays host to the headquarters of the United States Pacific Command, which directs the largest political theater of the US military. We're also the NSA regional headquarters for intelligence intercepts from Asia. We are the staging grounds of the biennial Rim of the Pacific exercise, also known as RIMPAC, which is the largest maritime military exercise, which is present on these shores as we speak. So right now there are about 25,000 military service members from 26 different nations here to showcase their war machines, essentially. And while the fake state relishes in the $50 million influx into the economy, we are reminded of the sexual predation that will inevitably follow as military service members exercise their entitlement to Native women and girls. We know in our work that where military is, violence against women and girls will follow. So in our work, we seek to affirm that Hawaii's women, girls, and queer folks are not for R&R. Yeah, so the US military continues to pollute our land and waters, as we've seen with the poisoning of our water supply at Kapukaki, and actively contributes to the housing crisis here in Hawaii. And that's why we organize to fight for housing justice, as Kanaka Maoli Native Hawaiians are overrepresented in housing insecurity. Kanaka Maoli should not be houseless in their homeland, and Kanaka Maoli need their stolen land returned. So something that we call for is land back and bodies back, because we do know that the commodification of women and the commodification of land are intricately intertwined. So through our Land Back Bodies Back campaign, we're creating a movement that seeks to highlight how reclamation of land, like I said, is tied to women's liberation. So we understand that one cannot happen without the other. There's no path toward decolonization that doesn't prioritize women's liberation. And as we understand colonialism and imperialism, the desecration and objectification of land was made possible by the subjugation of women. So some things that we're working on right now include like programming a lot of community education through our summer school of youth activism and supporting popular education around militarism, particularly the military prostitution complex in Hawaii. We're also working on direct actions that reclaim spaces that have been overrun with militarism activities. So through our work, we seek to build deeply in our local communities and horizontally across borders, recognizing and being conscious of our differences while organizing too.
Sheesh. Thank you so much again. All right, so let's pass it back to Cole, and I'll repeat the question again. So we know an integral formation of American imperialism is the U.S. military-industrial complex and its wastelanding of indigenous peoples, territories, and resources. So how do you see this taking place? And what is your organization doing to counter it? So I know that's going to be a mouthful in New Mexico. So yes, thank you, Cole.
Yeah, thank you, Alex, for sharing. You know, I feel like New Mexico also ends up being another state for like a military hub for people. It's weird when you think about it. Somehow, a lot of people do come to the desert to like make an oath to the United States government, and they just dislike being in the desert. Do you know what I mean? It's weird because they think that, you know, the United States government will treat them well. And I feel like for a lot of people who do get into the military, then they slowly start to realize like, wow, you know, this is either they're delusional and they keep going with it because they're so patriotic or what have you, but the reality of it is that like joining the military or like the military in general, like it always comes at an expense of other relatives across the world. And I feel like especially with our third world relatives, you know, we recognize that our socialism and our freedom and liberation can never come at the expense of our third world comrades and relatives. And so when it comes to, you know, we're very anti-military, obviously, and just the way that it shows up in our communities. We still have Sandia National Labs up north that is heavily like monitored. It's actually really, I haven't been up north to where the Sandia National Labs are in a while. And so when I would drive through there, like they have checkpoints, right? When you go down to, Lano is up north, and it has like checkpoints. And as I was saying with Las Cruces, right, New Mexico, it's close to the Texas-Mexico border. And so just as it's weird as an Indigenous person, Los Alamos National Labs is what LANL stands for. Thank you, Jen. And so it's weird because you just have like this creeping anxiety whenever you have to come to contact with the military or even just the police, border patrol, right? You get this weird anxiety, but and it shouldn't even be that way, because you know that you're in your own homeland, you know that you're not doing anything wrong. But the fact that like the military and the police, they hold so much power, and too now, right after SCOTUS removing like people being read their Miranda rights, like now even more like we could just be targeted for anything, right? And how a couple of summers ago there was an action in downtown Albuquerque, and like the police were heavily, armored. And so when you think about just the money that gets allocated to a lot of these entities and the way they misuse that to enact violence and fear on community members from uprising or speaking out against, the inhumanity that they feel entitled to put on us and our relatives. New Mexico, there's so many there's so many military personnel, and when it comes to the safety of like our unsheltered relatives, and as Alexandra also mentioned, right, too, with our missing and our murdered Indigenous relatives, it's almost as if, it's almost as if that like keeping up with the colonial agenda, like they have to, right? Like Indigenous people, Black people, migrating people, the Asian and Pacific Islander communities, that it's easy, or for them, it's easy to see us as disposable and to incite violence on us, because that's just how history has always been. And for us at the Red Nation, we always take into account knowing the power that they have, and how are we going to do it differently? How are we going to not fall into their tactics and ways of trying to gain control and power, right? How can we stray away from those tactics that not only bring harm to our physical bodies, but it brings harm to the land as well? And I think for us, we're involved in like many different efforts, and facing against the military, and I just feel I feel like it's hard to really kind of, I guess, give a great answer, just because we're involved in a lot of different efforts, and sometimes these efforts, they come up so fast that we don't even have time to like process, we're just like, we just have to do it because nobody else is going to do it for us.
Thank you so much, Cole. Yeah, I mean, there really is so much going on in Mexico, right? Los Alamos National Labs is the first site of the Manhattan Project. The nuclear bomb was created in the heart of sacred Tewa land, my pueblo. It's where the Trinity test happened. It's where the Church Rock uranium tailings spill happened, which was at least as bad as Chernobyl. Of course, you'll never hear the US admit that. Not to mention, it is the hot spot for fracking. Obama referred to it as our own Saudi Arabia, and Biden has been opening leases for fracking nonstop since he's been in office. So we've got a lot going on in New Mexico in terms of resource extraction and hyper-militarism. And I do believe the nuclear industrial complex to be the heart of US militarism, right? So thank you so much, Cole. It's certainly a lot in New Mexico. So yeah, let's go ahead and move it back to Celine. So I'm going to say the question again. An integral formation of American imperialism is the US military industrial complex and its wastelanding of indigenous territories, resources, and people. And that's here and abroad, right? That's Indigenous people abroad as well. And how do you see this taking place, or how have you seen it taking place? And what is your organization doing to counter it?
Yes, thank you, Jen, and thank you for the context in New Mexico regarding the U.S. military complex and the nuclear military complex. The U.S. military, when we look at it from like an environmental perspective, it's, pollutes the equivalent of 100 countries. I'm sure you've read these headlines on Instagram and outside of Instagram, but it has, since the past year, kind of reached mainstream in terms of acknowledging that. Why is it such a polluting body? It's because of all of these weaponry, the nuclear power, the gas and oil, and their ties to fossil fuel, the jets, etc. And again, ties back to Oahu. So it's important to connect the dots as to what we are looking at and how it is a global systemic oppression. And then when you look at the money, like how is the US military funded? How does it continue to be so well funded? It's with the US taxpayers' money. For example, just to give you an idea, Israel receives $10 million per day by the US taxpayers per day. That's like 3-point-something billion dollars a year, for a total in the past couple of years of something like $35 billion of money that is being used on military arsenal that is of military quality, where it's being used directly on children, on women, on elders, to de-Arabize certain lands and remove Indigenous people of their lands, detribalize them and de-Arabize the region, so that they can build their condos and have access to further access to the land, to resources, and then how it spills over to Lebanon, for example, access to resources, natural gases, water is being pumped out of Lebanon to feed the Israeli military complex and the occupation. We also can look into water, like how does water get used, get weaponized? Because again, access to water, again, we understand in the way that we can see that, okay, water is life, because of our Indigenous brothers and sisters here in the US that say water is life. But in our region, we also understand that water is life because it is precisely life, like we need it to survive. And so the way that the US military is being present by proxy with other military to access these very resources, to remove access to land to a lot of people in Palestine, in Lebanon, across the region, to destabilize the region completely, again, as we are seeing with what happened in Syria, the Arab Spring in early 2010, 11, 12, 13, like these years were very crucial for the uprising in our region, and how the US military played a role in destabilizing the country and basically tipping it into a civil war for power, for access. And what does that do? That creates this polarization and pushes people into survival mode, into extremism in a lot of ways, whether it's Christian extremism or other. And so for us at Slow Factory, we observe these trends, we map them, we connect the dots, we look at how can we change the public opinion to create pressure and mobilize internationally, because it is very important to mobilize internationally to create a sort of international connection of power. Building power is not just locally, it's also, you can start locally, but you can create it internationally in a way through the usage of internet, of course, that sharing knowledge online. We use Instagram for that purpose. For example, when we posted something last summer when Gaza was once again being bombed, we said it's not complicated, it's colonialism, because that conversation was not happening at all in the United States. There was a lot of, it's complicated, I don't want to touch it, I don't want to talk about it, it's complicated. And so I think that really shook the table. And not only did it reach outside of our bubble of progressive bubble and progressive net of people that think alike, but also reached a larger audience that criticized it. And of course, we got harassed because of it. But at the end of the day, these are the conversations we need to challenge. And this is precisely the conversation we need to have today. Like when we're talking in the US about social change and social justice and racial justice, why is it so that certain groups of people don't get to have that privilege of having this racial justice? Why is it so that Arabs don't even have a place in the consensus? We don't even know how many Arabs exist here, and we don't even know what's going on with them, you know? What, are they being affected by COVID? What's their average access to health? You know, are they, you know, nothing. There's no data whatsoever concerning our group of people. And this type of erasure is very strategic and systemic, and it makes it so that, you know, certain groups of people aren't necessarily welcome in the conversation on access, on human rights, and definitely not welcome in discussing environmental justice, because, you know, we have other fish to fry than discussing whether or not you know, what's the environment. But when you look at it culturally, you know, when you look at pictures of when you are seeing someone in Palestine being taken away from their land, they're hugging their trees, like they're like literally holding their olive trees as their relatives, as part of their family lineage, because they are, okay? And so that is basically what the Slow Factory is trying to create, a sort of a body of work of anti-colonial knowledge and information that could be shared across nations, so that we build power with one another. Because at the end of the day, we can be called the minority or the oppressed or the, I don't know what, purposefully marginalized, whatever the label that is put upon us in the United States and the global North. At the end of the day, we are the global majority. We are far greater than the white ruling class. And again, how do we build power with one another? It's through knowledge, and it's through a dialogue and conversation, and definitely being able to be in these spaces where we are connecting the dots between what's happening in Oahu with the water, what's happening in Flint, Michigan, what's happening in Palestine, what's happening as well in Lebanon. So I'm just saying that this is a bit how we present ourselves, and I mean, how do we present our services? Like, we always look at how do we contribute in a meaningful way. We always ask ourselves that, like anything we post, everyone is like, post about this and talk about that. We're not our social media. Like, our social media is literally 1% of what we do. We have one person on social media, and the rest is like all of the team, 2 people actually right now on social media, but like the rest of the team is busy doing other things. And so why do we use social media and try to create a sort of a language, a sort of lexicon and glossary that is, you know, accessible to all? And of course, that's a double-edged sword, because then we get co-opted. The same language gets co-opted by non-progressive, you know, capitalist bodies that are just trying to reach a certain audience. So they reuse these terms, reuse these words, like regenerative, for example, or like environmentally friendly, or like even like anti-colonial or colonization or decolonial. Like, these words have been used this year by non-progressive bodies that are not fighting for Palestine or for indigenous rights or for Black liberation anywhere. They're just reusing these words to access a certain group, a certain demographic of people that are interested in these things, that want to know, that want to learn. And one of the main questions that we get when we do our work, for example, if you all are interested, there's one of the works that we do is called Open Education. It's free, accessible political education, if you will, but it's environmental and human rights information that is at the intersection of a lot of different industries. We work horizontally across these industries. That's why it's very hard to fund what we do, because we're not in silo into one specific category. A bit like Af3irm, like I'm hearing you say, for example, Alexandra, you're doing this. Oftentimes, especially as a woman and a woman of color, people are like, well, how do you do all this? Like, why don't you just focus on one thing? And no, the point is to not focus on one thing. The point is to focus on everything. And the point is to work across all of these different industries, different categories, different sectors. That's how we're breaking barriers. But just to go back to Open EDU, that's one of the things that we do. And it's a very important body of work that allows us to go further than this Instagram, TikTok world of the feeling of knowledge, the feeling that I know what I'm talking about. And most of the people that are clicking and sharing all these things, they haven't read the book cover to cover, which, okay, I understand, we're busy trying to survive, but at the end of the day, that's the ask. Like, we need to go further. We need to try to understand, because that builds nuance, because it's a double-edged sword what we're doing with this whole, access to knowledge. One is co-opting, people co-opt the work, and second of all, it's basically pushing to a polarization. We're contributing to the polarization of opinions. There's no room for nuance in this kind of work. So that's a little bit what we're doing and what we're thinking about.
So powerful. Thank you, Celine. I really appreciate you touching on co-optation and how things get lost and misconstrued in the milieu of social media. That's so important. Thank you so much. All right, let's move on to Gina. So the question again, hang on one sec. Okay. An integral formation of American imperialism is the U.S. military-industrial complex and its wastelanding of indigenous peoples, territories, and resources. How do you see this taking place, and what is your organization doing to counter it?
I'd like to respond to what Celine and Nicole and Alexandra said while answering this question at the same time. So the nuance of everything, this I wrote down because, and the co-opting, that happening here in Hawaii, like we have the Navy saying that they want to be stewards of the land. That is, they're using the word stewards of the land. So in the last news conference, they have PR people working for them before that was a top PR company in Hawaii. So, they know what words to use. And I want to just say the word natural attenuation just means that they don't know what to do with all the toxins. They're just saying nature takes care of it. At first, I had to look it up in 2014. And then I found it everywhere, every contaminated community. That means almost every single base is contaminated. There's like 460 something, if you look on the EWG site, Environmental Working Group site, there's a map that shows all of the PFOAs coming out of, usually it's an Air Force base where it's a fire retardant. A PFOA, just in case you don't know, is a forever chemical. You can see the movie called Dark Waters. It's on the East Coast, and it just has all these cows dying from drinking the water from a Dow chemical, Teflon chemical plant. The kids come out funny kind. It's this huge, there's even a book, there's a movie, it's just like it was the next big movie after Erin Brockovich. So I'm just a regular person from Halava Valley with the oil spill in the middle of we have like Camp Smith, that controls all of the military planning from California to East Africa, is like 5 minutes away from where my family lives at the same time. So it's like we're like at the center of all this. But if you look behind me, there's like this freshwater lens, which has the most purest water. We don't even have to do anything to drink super pure water, but now this has been contaminated. So this was like everybody in Hawaii, like I think, well, at least as everyone around me was screaming, because it's like, in Avatar when they kill the tree and everything is connected. So all that water that goes to the natural springs, to the freshwater farms, all that water could be contaminated. So currently today, what we have going on is they're pumping out from right outside of my house, Halava Valley, they're pumping out millions of gallons a day and putting it into a stream, wasting all of the lens, the pure aquifer lens, because they don't want the contamination to spread laterally to the rest of the population houses. So in the valley next to me, they already have some legacy fuel, which means like not the last year's leak or 2014 leak, but even maybe prior leaks have like saturated the aquifer. And even though it's presented that these large tanks of 180 million gallons that had spilled over the, that can spill on the aquifer, or have actually spilled there, it's unaccounted for fuel of 180,000 gallons, but we have millions of gallons still can leak. They just didn't take it seriously. So what Nicole was saying and Jen was mentioning, I was just like, I'm so glad you guys mentioned all that stuff going on in New Mexico. I was just like, this is like, there's one thing you can count on the military, it's that they will contaminate, because like they don't have a program or protocol. Okay, here we bring all these dangerous chemicals. Oh, what is the end life of it? What do we do with it? It's just assume that it's going to go into the environment. So if there's no accountability of where this goes, then that's it. And then just want to mention, it's easy to talk only about the military, about imperialism or colonization. But if you think about it, in Hawaii, 70% of our farmlands are now dominated by the top chemical companies of the world. These are chemical companies that came out of World War II. They don't have anything better to do than make GMO products, which is genetically modified organisms that require their chemicals of poison and killing to be sprayed, and they manipulate the seed. This is how much respect they have for nature. They will patent the nature, and then they will sue the organic farmers around them because the little seed goes into their organic farm, get rid of their lands, and saturate the aquifer with chemicals that are meant to like kill, So we have another problem, like in the first 2014 leak, we have 13 million gallons of activated charcoal that is used on our west side of the island. In order to drink water, we have a legacy of pesticides. Before we had sugarcane and atrazine, we had all these problems. And then now we have 86 restricted use pesticides. So in a way, this is the new form. It's basically, if I could rephrase the question, even though we're focusing on the US imperialism, this is like land, water, food. It's all the system that is unconscious to make what is defined as profit at the expense of the rest of the world. So anything like this, I think counts as imperialism. Kind of, when I read about it, it's a kind of a violence to natural systems. This actually is the cause of climate change, is this unconsciousness. That's why I switched my picture to this, because it shows a more holistic, people just don't understand how nature works. They don't understand, like, I mean, I'm not the saying that I understand, but I mean, you know what I mean? It's just like the people are like, think it's okay to continue to spray. So, that's just one thing. Another industry, and it's, notice the word industry because it's a military industry, tourism industry, this whole thing industry, there's like, think about it, AI industry. So now they're using the AI to, I mean, it can be used a good way or how you want to interpret it, but it can also be a system, another system that we have to pay attention to, because it is used like it's a billions-dollar industry on how to like for example, just even farming, it's $1 billion industry. They don't consider the input for the, the deep learning. They don't consider biodiversity, or are we reversing climate change through microorganisms? These kinds of parameters are not in the current AI. So same thing with vaccine industry. I would just mention, this is controversial, but we can think about I trust the Navy more than I trust the CDC, so these are like large concepts, but I think this is what's causing climate change, and it's the same thing that's causing US military to behave the way that they do, which is 1/3 of the economy, 1/3 of taxpayer money in the US is going towards the military. I think that it would be important to redefine, suggest to the military through the Pentagon what their mission should be. They are not achieving freedom for all, and they're not reversing climate change, which is the biggest thing they should be focusing on. So I just wanted to like broaden it, because everybody said it's the basic, really good stuff, but how to move forward in a way is, if we cannot address the nuance and the detail of what is happening. So basically we'll go to all these meetings, and these huge meetings, but no one ever talks about the nuance or the details. So these meetings go nowhere. So this actual system is not working. So I really honestly think we have to do something new. So my suggestion is, I don't think that the military will come up with their own new mantra. I think because of this void of, there's a void of a different system, that there's not enough emphasis on a more holistic system. Those things should be promoted. I'll let Jen go to the next person and question.
Thank you so much for all that, Gina. Very powerful truth-telling indeed. Sorry, it's kind of loud over here. I'm going to start again with Alexandra. So the third question, we're thinking about the 4th of July and how it's been concocted as a day to celebrate US independence, freedom, nationalism, US exceptionalism, but most of all, the US military. And so how are Indigenous peoples and nations complicit in this celebration? And how do you recommend we organize our own communities against celebrating it?
Thanks for this question, Jen. I would say that the rhetoric of US hegemony does a lot of heavy lifting when it comes to celebrations of American exceptionalism and nationalism here in Hawaii. And what I mean by rhetoric is, like, we see Indigenous peoples and colonial subjects complicit in these celebrations and say things like, if it wasn't America, it would be China, Russia, Japan, or whoever, when in actuality, it's the US occupation of Hawaii that paints a target on these islands. So we are constantly, from birth to death, bombarded with imperialist propaganda that justifies and essentializes US occupation and militarization of Indigenous lands. We're made to believe that the military keeps us safe. The military is essential. The price of life, joy, and quote unquote freedom is war and conquest abroad. And this like heavy propaganda in combination with Native folks like relegation to poverty and forceful de-indigenization puts Indigenous people in a position to seek survival through military enlistment, which affords like some degree of class mobility and assimilation, which is something that we see a lot. Like my family in particular too immigrated to the United States through the US military from the Philippines. So I would say that this could explain why we see an overrepresentation of Filipinos, Hawaiians, and other Pacific Islanders in our communities defending the US military. One way we can reach our communities is to maybe like hold community events, just talk story, beach actions, art builds, healing spaces, storytelling, events have all been ways that we've engaged our communities and connected with them on these common struggles. Like, good organizers know how to meet people where they are and then push them further and further into the right direction. And I think having a mass movement built off of those sort of things could help get us where we want to be, and take us away from this celebration of Independence Day and move us more towards like the celebration of Haunani Ke Trask's legacy. And at the end of the month, we have La Ho'i Ho'i'ea, which is like the Hawaiian Independence Day instead. So we have some good options here in Hawaii, actually.
Yeah, certainly. Why celebrate imperialism when there's so much else we could be celebrating, right? Thank you for that. So let's go ahead and move to Cole. So again, the 4th of July has been concocted as a day to celebrate U.S. independence, freedom, nationalism, and U.S. exceptionalism, and most of all, the military. So how are Indigenous peoples and nations complicit in this celebration? And how do you recommend we organize our own communities against celebrating? And I know it's a big one in Indian country, right?
It really is a big one when you say that and you think about it, because a lot of our relatives have either are enlisting or have enlisted and have been a part of the military. And it's wild because, you know, our Indigenous communities were only 2% of the population, right? Yet, however, we see a high enlistment service for our Indigenous relatives. And I feel like, I mean, not are too, right, being complacent in knowing that you're joining probably one of the biggest gangs in the world, right, to to further the colonial agenda of extraction, of, you know, causing harm and violence to other people. And it's hard, right? Because when we say like we're anti-military, anti-imperialist, a lot of our relatives do feel that sting. They feel like we're not supporting them, or that we're not praising them for joining the military, when in reality, like, it's not like we're not aware of like their material conditions that make them feel the need to enlist in the military. We hopefully in the future, you know, our relatives don't have to sign up for something just because they need a paycheck or a place to live or things like that. I hope, or to even feel patriotic or a sense of pride. You know, there's a saying in the Red Nation, whenever we do direct actions, right, there's no pride in genocide. And so just making sure that people are like cognizant or like understanding of that even your liberation, you know, it's tied to other people as well, as much as it is to this taking care of this planet. And so I feel like you know, for events that are happening to combat that, to combat this celebration of what they think is freedom, right? Just by, you know, holding and taking up other spaces, you know, as Jen said, there's so much to celebrate within our communities, you know, even the fact that we even got to like wake up, you know, and have our and like to feel the ground underneath our feet, to like breathe in the air, right? Like that's even just a win within itself, because the United States government, you know, is so stuck on the fact of removing us, because then removing us, right, as history has shown, then they can be more entitled to more land or more resources and further their wealth and further, that colonial project of systemic oppression on us. And so I feel like us, getting to be in space with one another, even though, we're still in a pandemic, but like recognizing like how can we, right, put on spaces to be with one another together in safe ways? How can we get this information out to everyone, right? And I think today, like having the panel today, is just one of many ways that we can address like how do we pull away from that mindset? How do we come back together, for the sake of not only like one another, but for the planet. And so, yeah, I agree with Alexandra. There's different ways that we can get how would you say, I'm losing my word or my train of thought of, innovative, because not a lot of our relatives want to like be reading all the time, right? So how do we make this more accessible for people? And I think it's beautiful the ways that we can come up with being in space and celebrating one another and bringing that joy and that hope back, that there's so much more possible and better than imperialism or that mentality.
Thank you, Cole. So let's move it back to Celine. The 4th of July celebrates U.S. independence, freedom, nationalism, U.S. exceptionalism, and the military. So how are Indigenous peoples and nations complicit in this celebration? And how do you recommend we organize our own communities against celebrating it?
Thank you for that. And I want to bring it to two things that maybe could be a little bit more tangible. Like one of it is the apparel that represents military, just the military fashion, if you will, like camouflage pants or, just military style that has been and continues to be a sort of staple for what we consider both like grunge and edgy and cool. And at the same time, whenever we look at futuristic fashion of how we're going to survive an apocalyptic planet, like military outfits are always front and center in fashion when it comes to imagining a future. So it's almost so oppressively ingrained into how we even imagine the future and how we dress to portray power, that to me it's like internationally related. Like, for example, the 4th of July, even the flag of the American flag on apparel is worn by people all over the world, whether they believe they like it or not. It's just so fashionable, and through fashion it has infiltrated every single culture on the planet. And because of the notion of modernism is code for colonialism. Basically, the way we dress is basically embodying these notions of imperialism and these notions of occupation and army and military, and that is basically cool. They turned it even into the fashion is cool, so that means wearing it is cool. And so it's interesting because I am not American and I don't care about the 4th of July, but at the same time it has this nostalgic sort of international romantic look through the movies and through the fashion, that I feel like even when you're not related to the United States, you kind of are connected to what's happening today on the 4th of July. And then a ceremony that is celebrating borders is problematic anywhere in the world, okay? Because just to say, like, from space, we can't see any borders. Like, we are on a planet that has no physical borders, or the borders that it has is a mountain and a lake and a water and basically land. Those are the borders that you have to, go through to in order to access another part of the land. And so I just want to just remind, communities often, it's like, what are we even celebrating? We're celebrating war, and we're celebrating death, and we're celebrating genocide, and especially here in the United States. And so basically the work that we are doing in not celebrating these things, is ongoing. It's not just today, we're gonna start a panel and discuss about it, and that's it, we're doing it. I'm gonna boycott not going to the fireworks, or I'm not gonna eat a hot dog. First, I don't eat hot dogs, but just like, not me, but people, it's not just one thing that you do today, it's ongoing. Like this work that we're doing is not just today, the celebration of the 4th of July, it's every single day it's 4th of July, because the 4th of July is not just a birthday, it's a system. It's it's every day. It's every day the way that it's being organized and designed, and everything that we're discussing. So it's ongoing reclamation of our freedom and our knowledge and our way of life, and refusing this culture. It's refusal of this culture that is the American omnipresent oppressive culture that is basically imposed upon us, literally imposed upon us through fashion, through music, through film, through literature, to everything. America has the most access to all forms of creation and the most money to create, which is very sad, because I want to watch movies that are not American. I don't want to watch any American movie, and I don't want to watch, and also similarly reading and fashion wise, like, what are we choosing to wear? How are we choosing to, exist and show up? It's not just what I'm wearing, of course, it's not what I'm buying, it's not what I'm eating, it's how I'm living my life, not just me personally, but collectively. It's so that's a little bit the message that we have ongoing at the Slow Factory. And it's not just a message like of shaming anybody. You love it, do it, whatever, like it's beautiful. The flag looks really good on clothing. Like, I'm not going to tell you not to wear it, but just this flag, that is the flag of the United States. It's honestly very surprising if you look at how it's being used as a branding, in marketing and branding, how it's being used onto everything. And it's being made so attractive. It's even a whole genre in art, in contemporary art. It's a whole genre of exploration, the flag. So it's a question that is not just about today. It's a question that really reflects every layer of our existence and every interaction that we have with American culture. And what does it mean, this American culture? And how do we must fit into it in order to exist, in order to be seen? It's very sad, but that's a little bit how it is. And so we need other forms of distribution, like the Red Nation, Red Media. That's another form of broadcasting and distribution that we need more of. These are the things that we need more of: more art, more culture, funded by the taxpayers, instead of putting that money into military, funding the organizations that you really love and care about. Like, why are you so stingy when it comes to funding the work of people that are literally putting their lives in danger, putting their financial situation in danger, their physical bodies in danger for you, so you can click and like an Instagram post or share it? Who cares? Like, you have to put your money where your mouth is at this time. Otherwise, anyway, Uncle Sam is taking it for their military occupation worldwide. So it's not just today. It's not just what you do today, or like, oh, I'm going to post a thing. I'm like, the 4th of July is canceled, sign the women. Like, really? Like, where did you put your money today? What did you invest in? Or if you can't invest, like, what are you doing to put your body in a situation that is contributing to this collective change and collective liberation? I'm just, I've been in this place for so long that I'm a little bit becoming an old cranky witch. But like, at the end of the day, it's true, like, I want to see more. And so that's to answer your question. We need more.
Thank you so much, Celine. So many amazing points yet again. So I'm going to ask this question again to Gina, and then I think I'm going to go ahead and wrap it up. If panelists are feeling like it's about time, I see our audience is dwindling a little bit, and we're also going to be coming up on 2 hours. Right now we're at 1 hour and 35 minutes. So Gina, how are Indigenous peoples and nations complicit in the celebration of the 4th of July? And how do you recommend we organize our own communities against celebrating it?
So in Hawaii, I mean, OWP, the Oahu Water Protectors, today has a program called Theft of a Nation. So they have a table at the Iolani Palace. Just in case you don't know, the Queen was dethroned. It was initially capitalist. They call it the Big Five, came to Hawaii. They are making a lot of money with sending immigrants to Hawaii for the sugarcane fields. Then eventually there's a coup where they use the military to take over Hawaii. This is like so 4th of July for a lot of people in Hawaii, they like think it's a vacation kind of, but everybody knows that the monarchy was overthrown. I think at least people I know, and they have respect for that's not good, you know. But it is a big holiday, so then people will take off. But the other way is whenever you talk about Pearl Harbor, that was the Queen's lands. So people here, even my father, remember eating out of Pearl Harbor, like seafood. So like my sister and I cannot believe that. It's a super fun site right now, so we can't believe it. So regarding the question about celebrating, I kind of want to change it to what can we do every day, or think about like how to change the energy, because the military has these $1 leases for like these huge bases in Hawaii where they can just do whatever they want. That thing is coming up, and so if we spend all our energy being anti, then what happened is all energy is focused on just that. Whereas if we come up with more positive solutions to create peace with our so-called enemies, which are just other human beings who care about their families, you know. For example, I just saw a permaculture video in Jordan. They were able to make 1/5 the amount of water and make all this food like in a desert. And I would think that, you know, if you're having an argument about water, having a joint project, like something like that, where people can actually get something done and then feed each other, that is like so much goodwill. This like these kind of projects is a celebrating. And I have to be honest, growing up in Hawaii, it always was kind of weird to me what is Halloween and this 4th of July, and actually Christmas is kind of weird to me too, because of course I like to get presents, but you know, as a child, but I always wonder like, what about the moon? It's not coordinated like other countries where, you know, oh, we're gonna have a moon cake festival, or you know, this is the biggest moon for the harvest moon, or something, you know, like related to for real stuff. Anyway, so sorry to change the question a little bit, but so the other positive suggestion would be like maybe do the opposite of what we don't like. So for example, so many people are protesting RIMPAC, which is this you know, it was even on the news that Alexandra was mentioning that in RIMPAC, all these sailors come, and just a few days ago, where the energetic God is posted, you know, the 2 energy centers, they have like a koa, and the RIMPAC team, people think maybe it was a RIMPAC soldier, you know, after drinking, they put the like a tiki torch spear inside the eye of this like sacred object that people took so much time. It represents the purity of the water and the energy to focus on, and it was like desecrated. And there's like that going on all the time. And so like, I mean, so then what happened was the activists make like a tent, and so they have 10 days of education at the site, you know, after they got to fix it and clean it up or whatnot. But I would suggest, like, if we don't like that, what can we do positively as an action? So that would be everybody that's being called an enemy, that you know, because RIMPAC is trying to make an alliance with those powers that want to stay in power, right, and protect. So how can we create like a little Jordans, you know, little Jordans like this to increase the positivity? Because if you think about it, if you have a RIMPAC going on, how does the other country feel? They're going to feel threatened, right? So how can we create freedom and peace, not thinking like the military? You see what I'm saying? So that is what I think about a lot, because the military people will not come up with remediation. They don't know what is remediation. They think remediation in Hawaii is to keep pumping the water out. They don't think about microorganisms, biodiversity to heal the toxin. So just want to put it out there, indigenous microorganisms, yes, they can eat the toxins like pesticide and whatnot, but it takes a whole biodiversity of it. And a lot of the scientists will say they're looking for one microorganism to eat the oil or one to eat this pesticide. And even the nuclear in Japan, because of Fukushima, they think of, like, a lot of people just think one solution, but if it's actually microorganisms can eat up the nuclear because they're the oldest form of life. So the Japanese people, activists, have been spraying EM or effective microorganism or indigenous organisms to clean up. So I just wanted to encourage everybody that probably the systems that created the problem will not come up with a solution, and that we need to use every resource that we can working with nature, and also holistically looking at things to come up with the solution. And that involves, that's why I keep saying we should just tell the Pentagon, we should go to the Pentagon and tell them, because I watch them on the Committee of Readiness, they just don't understand the situation here in Hawaii. They think that they can use another aquifer somewhere else and keep going to another aquifer and keep doing what they're doing. They don't understand the whole island from the surface to the lens is an aquifer. Everything that you put on the island will go to the water if you don't know where it's going. You know what I mean? Anyway, I really appreciate everybody's bringing this attention to this topic, and I can't believe that we had such a international webinar like this on this topic. Thank you for everything.
Thank you so much, Gina. And thank you so much, everyone. Thank you for sticking with us. Those of you tuning in, watching the live streams, it really means a lot. And I'm sorry we didn't have time to get to our individual questions. We're coming up on 1:45, but I would love to keep this conversation going. I plan on reaching out to some of you outside of this, and I look forward to meeting some of you when Red Nation and Red Media arrive in Oahu in August. So thank you so much, everybody, for this wonderful conversation. And remember, this conversation is just the start of many more, and it's just the start of a lot more action and a lot more planning for these solutions, for how to save our earth, for how to protect our relatives, our water, our land. So thank you so much again, and I look forward to being in touch with all of you. And thank you again to the audience. Thank you so much for our ASL interpreters, for our Spanish translator, Maida, and all of our tech people behind the scenes. Thank you so much again.